She broke all the rules for love. But what happened next left even the coldest speechless. The fog covered the streets of Portland that Monday winter morning as Emily Martinez, still with sleep in her eyes, waited for the first bus at the nearly empty stop. It was 5:15 in the morning, and the dark skies seemed to conspire against her awakening. She adjusted the worn scarf around her neck, trying to protect herself from the typical cold of the Oregon city, while mentally organizing all the tasks that awaited her at the Wilson mansion. The journey to the Westbrook neighborhood, one of the most affluent in the city, consumed almost 2 hours of her morning. 2 buses, a 10-minute walk, and the constant feeling that she lived in 2 completely different worlds. On one side, the small 2-room apartment where she lived with her daughter Lily and her mother, Mrs. Rose, in the East Side neighborhood. On the other, the imposing gates of the residence where she had worked for almost a year as a domestic employee. "Good morning, Mr. Frank," she greeted the mansion's doorman, who was already waiting with the side gate slightly open. "Cold morning?" "Today, huh?" "Sure is, Emily. They say the temperature will drop even more during the week. Take care of yourself." Emily nodded with a tired but genuine smile. At 32, she carried in her brown eyes the determination of someone who had learned early on that complaining didn't change circumstances. Her steps were silent along the side garden to the service entrance, as if her presence needed to be imperceptible, despite being essential. The mansion was already in motion, despite the early hour. In the kitchen, Mrs. Betty, the 60-year-old cook who had worked for the Wilson family for 2 decades, prepared breakfast while softly humming an old song. "You arrived early today, girl," commented the older woman without taking her eyes off the bread she was cutting. "As always, Mrs. Betty," replied Emily, storing her bag in the cabinet designated for employees and putting on the navy blue apron with the discreet Wilson family crest embroidered on the pocket. "Is the boss up yet?" "Not yet, but the little one is already awake. I heard noises from his room about 10 minutes ago." Emily smiled at the thought of Tommy, Michael Wilson's 9-year-old son, a sweet boy, with curious eyes and endless questions, who had lost his mother at the age of 4. When Emily started working at the house, he barely spoke to the staff. Now he sought her company to tell stories from school, show drawings, or simply stay close while she tidied the rooms. She went up the stairs toward the 2nd floor, where the family's bedrooms were located. In the hallway, she saw Tommy's bedroom door ajar and a soft light escaping through the crack. "Good morning, little early bird," she said upon entering, finding the boy sitting on the bed, leafing through an adventure book. "You woke up early." "Today? I have a presentation at school," he replied, adjusting his round glasses on his face. "I'm nervous, Em." The nickname had emerged spontaneously one afternoon when they were playing guessing games in the garden. Since then, he refused to call her by her full name. "Nervous about what?" "You know everything about dinosaurs. It's going to be the best presentation in the class." Tommy smiled, revealing the gap left by a recently lost baby tooth. "Will you help me review after breakfast?" "Of course I will. Now come on. Put on your uniform while I prepare your materials." In the dining room, Michael Wilson was already seated at the table when Emily came down with Tommy. Tall, with an athletic build even at 42, the businessman flipped through the newspaper with his attention divided between the news and the tablet where he checked emails. He briefly raised his eyes when his son entered, a discreet smile softening the lines of expression that marked his face. "Good morning, champ," he greeted, extending his hand to ruffle his son's hair. "Ready for the presentation?" "Yes, Em is going to help me review." Michael nodded, casting a quick glance at Emily. "Good morning, Emily. Thank you for that." "It's my job, sir," she replied professionally, although she felt her heart race slightly under the boss's penetrating gaze. "Excuse me. I'll start cleaning the living room." The morning hours passed as usual. Emily cleaned, organized, ironed clothes, and helped Tommy with the final details of his presentation before the driver took him to school. Michael left for an important meeting at the headquarters of his chain of dental clinics, not without first confirming that he would be back for dinner. It was almost noon when Emily began cleaning the floor of the main living room. Her cell phone, kept in the pocket of her apron, suddenly vibrated. It was rare to receive calls during work hours. Only her mother and Lily's school had the number, and both knew they should only use it in case of emergency. Seeing the school's number, on the screen her heart raced. She answered with a trembling voice. "Mrs. Martinez." The coordinator's voice sounded urgent on the other end of the line. "You need to come immediately. Lily had a severe respiratory attack. She fainted in the schoolyard during recess." The world seemed to freeze around Emily. Her daughter, so small and fragile with her chronic respiratory problems, was in danger. "We've already called for an ambulance," continued the coordinator, "but there's a huge traffic jam on the highway. We don't know when it will arrive." "I'm coming," was all she could respond, hanging up the phone with trembling hands. Without thinking twice, she called Rodrigo, her ex-partner and Lily's father. Nothing. Voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. She tried a rideshare app, but no driver accepted the call, probably due to the same traffic jam mentioned by the coordinator. "Nathan?" She called for the mansion's driver, but Mrs. Betty informed her that he had not yet returned from taking the boss. Emily felt desperation grow in her chest like a suffocating wave. It was then that she saw, on the marble sideboard at the entrance, the keys to Michael's black SUV gleaming under the light that entered through the French windows. She had never driven a car like that. In fact, she hadn't driven in years, not since the days when Rodrigo taught her in the old family car. Taking the boss's car without authorization could cost her job. But at that moment, what was at stake was much greater than any job. In an impulse, she took the keys, her purse, and ran to the garage. The SUV was imposing, much larger than any vehicle she had ever driven. With trembling hands, she started the engine, which purred softly. She took a deep breath, adjusted the mirrors as she remembered learning years ago, and slowly maneuvered out of the property. "Forgive me, Mr. Wilson," she murmured to herself as she accelerated through the streets of Westbrook toward Lily's school at the other end of the city. The traffic was chaotic, as she had been warned. Horns sounded from all sides. Ambulances tried to make way between stopped cars. Emily kept her eyes fixed on the road, her hands gripping the steering wheel, so tightly that her knuckles whitened. Each minute seemed like an eternity. When she finally arrived at the school, she parked the SUV haphazardly at the entrance, barely remembering to take the keys from the ignition. She ran through the corridors until she found her daughter in the infirmary, small and pale, struggling to breathe while the school nurse held an improvised oxygen mask over her face. "Mom," whispered Lily upon seeing her, her large, frightened eyes shining with contained tears. "I'm here, my love. I'm here." Emily took her in her arms, feeling her daughter's fragile body tremble. "We're going to the hospital now." No one questioned when she carried the girl to the luxurious SUV. Perhaps they presumed she was some rich relative who had come to pick up the child. Within minutes, they were on their way to St. Mary's Hospital, the closest one. In the emergency room, Lily was immediately attended to. The doctors took the girl inside while Emily filled out the admission form with trembling hands, leaving the boss's car parked any which way at the hospital entrance, the doors still unlocked, forgotten in the desperation of the moment. The only thing that mattered now was her daughter. The consequences would come later, and Emily was prepared to face them, whatever the price. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. It was past 3 in the afternoon when Michael Wilson received the call that interrupted his meeting with investors. The secretary entered the conference room with a concerned expression, approaching discreetly. "Mr. Wilson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's urgent. They called from St. Mary's Hospital. They found your car in the emergency parking lot." Michael frowned, confused. "My car? Which car?" "The black SUV, sir. It's irregularly parked at the emergency entrance. The other doors are unlocked." Confusion gave way to concern. His first thought was of Tommy. Had something happened to his son? But he quickly dismissed that idea, remembering that the driver would take him directly from school to his paternal grandmother's house that afternoon. "I apologize, gentlemen," he said to those present in the room, closing the folder of documents in front of him. "I need to resolve a family emergency. Marcus will conclude the presentation." In the taxi on the way to the hospital, Michael alternated between anger and apprehension. Who could have taken his car? Why take it to a hospital? The possibilities ran through his head like an accelerated film, none of them pleasant. Upon arriving at St. Mary's, he immediately located the SUV, parked awkwardly near the emergency entrance, occupying almost 2 spaces. A hospital employee approached as soon as he saw him examining the vehicle. "Are you the owner? We were about to call a tow truck. You can't park like this in the ambulance area." "Who left the car here?" asked Michael, ignoring the warning. "A woman with a child a few hours ago. She ran in carrying the girl in her arms. She seemed quite desperate." Michael felt a sudden realization. Emily. It could only be her. But why? He entered the hospital determined to understand what had happened. At the reception, he asked about recently admitted patients. The attendant, after some initial resistance, confirmed the admission of a child named Lily Martinez, brought by her mother in a state of respiratory emergency. "Room 214, second floor," informed the receptionist, "but only family members can visit." "I'm the mother's boss," replied Michael with the authority of someone not accustomed to hearing refusals, "and she took my car without authorization." He quickly climbed the stairs, the initial anger giving way to growing curiosity. In the corridor of the second floor, he heard Emily's voice before seeing her, a soft voice humming something that sounded like a lullaby. He stopped at the door of room 214, observing the scene for a few moments. Emily was sitting at the edge of the hospital bed, holding the hand of a small, thin girl very similar to her. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same delicate face shape. The child wore an oxygen mask and had her eyes closed, apparently sleeping, while her mother caressed her curly hair. "Emily," he finally called, his voice more contained than he had planned. She raised her eyes, and the terror that Michael saw in them surprised him. It was the look of someone who knew they had committed a serious mistake but did not regret it. "Mr. Wilson?" Emily rose slowly, as if not wanting to wake her daughter. "I can explain." "I'm waiting," he replied, crossing his arms. He tried to maintain a severe expression, but something in the scene before him made it difficult to sustain the anger. "I received a call from the school. Lily had a severe respiratory attack. The ambulance couldn't get through because of the traffic jam. I tried to call a car, tried to call her father, my mother, but—" Her voice faltered. "She could have died if I hadn't gotten there quickly." Michael looked at the girl in the bed, so small and fragile. He remembered Tommy at the same age when he had pneumonia and spent 3 days in the hospital. The anguish he felt on that occasion, the fear of losing his son. Could he blame Emily for doing what any parent would do? "I know I was wrong. I know I shouldn't have taken the car without permission," she continued, her voice firm despite the tears that threatened to fall. "I accept the consequences. If you want to fire me, I understand. I only ask that you let me stay with her today. I'll collect my things tomorrow and—" "What did the doctors say?" interrupted Michael, surprising himself with the question. Emily blinked, confused by the change of subject. "They said she had a severe asthma attack. If I had been delayed longer, if the ambulance had to wait through the traffic—" Her voice faltered again. Michael nodded, thoughtful. He approached the bed, observing the girl more carefully. He saw in her traces of Tommy, not in appearance but in vulnerability, in the confidence with which she slept, knowing her mother was nearby. "How long will she be hospitalized?" "At least until tomorrow. They want to make sure her condition is stabilized before releasing her." Emily hesitated. "Mr. Wilson, about the car—" "The car is fine," he replied, shrugging. "I've already parked it properly. I left your name at the reception so they won't bother you." Emily stared at him, surprised. It was the last reaction she expected. "Thank you, but aren't you going to fire me?" Michael looked out the window of the room, observing the late afternoon that covered Portland with orange hues. Say part of him, the rational and controlling part that had built an empire of dental clinics, said that yes, he should fire her. After all, she had taken his car without authorization, a valuable asset, risking damage to it. Trust had been broken. But Another part, perhaps the one that most identified with the desperate look of a mother willing to do anything for her child, understood Emily's impulse perfectly. "I'm not going to fire you," he finally said, turning to face her. "But we need to establish some rules. If something like this happens again, call me, no matter where I am or what I'm doing. Understood?" Emily nodded, unable to hide her relief. "Yes, sir. And I think we need to talk about your daughter's situation. I have some medical contacts who could help, pediatric specialists in respiratory diseases. I wouldn't be able to pay for private consultations, sir." Michael made a dismissive gesture with his hand. "I'm not talking about payment. I'm talking about adequate care. No child should go through this." The silence that followed was interrupted by a small moan from the girl in the bed. Lily slowly opened her eyes, blinking a few times until focusing on her mother. Then she noticed the presence of the stranger beside her. "This is my boss, sweetie," Emily explained softly. "Remember I told you about him? Tommy's dad." Lily nodded weakly, her curious eyes examining Michael. "Hi, Lily," he said, moving a bit closer. "Your mum tells me a lot about you." It wasn't true. In reality, Emily almost never mentioned her personal life at work, but it seemed like the right thing to say at that moment. "Thank you for letting my mom use your car," said the girl with a weak voice behind the mask. "She was very worried about me." Michael smiled, touched by the child's sincerity. "You're welcome. The important thing is that you're okay." He looked at Emily, who observed the interaction with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. There was something in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before. A silent strength, a dignity that transcended the difficult situation in which she found herself. "I'll leave you to rest," he said, heading toward the door. "Tomorrow I'll send Nathan to pick you up. And Emily, take a few days to take care of her, with pay, of course." Before she could thank him, Michael had already left, leaving behind a completely confused Emily with the turn of events. The next day, as promised, the family driver arrived at the hospital shortly after lunch. To Emily's surprise, he didn't take her home, but to the mansion in Westbrook. "The boss asked you to bring your daughter there," explained Nathan. "He said she'll be better in the guest room than in your apartment. Something about humidity and respiratory problems." Emily didn't know what to say. She accepted the offer because, in fact, the small apartment where she lived with her mother was damp and had mold on some walls, terrible conditions for someone with respiratory problems. When they arrived at the mansion, they were greeted not by the other staff, but by Michael himself, who was waiting at the main entrance, not at the service entrance, through which Emily always entered. "Welcome," he said, with a smile that Emily had never seen directed at her. "Tommy is anxious to meet Lily. He's never had many friends his age here." That afternoon, as she watched her daughter playing shyly with Tommy in the garden, under Michael's attentive gaze, Emily felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Not just for Lily, but for herself. What she didn't know was that this episode would be just the beginning of a much greater transformation in her life, and in the lives of everyone in that house. The following weeks brought a new routine to the Wilson mansion. What should have been a temporary stay for Lily was prolonged when Mrs. Rose, Emily's mother, had to be hospitalized due to diabetes complications. With the elderly woman in the hospital and the apartment still in inadequate conditions for the girl with respiratory problems, Michael insisted they stay. "It's temporary," Emily assured herself every morning as she arranged the small suitcase where she kept the few clothes she had brought for her daughter. But the days turned into weeks, and the boundaries between her role as an employee and her presence as Lily's mother began to blur. One Saturday afternoon, a month after the car incident, Michael found Emily in the kitchen preparing a cake while the children played in the garden. "I thought it was your day off," he commented, helping himself to coffee. "It is," she replied, without taking her eyes off the batter she was mixing. But Tommy asked for carrot cake with chocolate, and Lily wanted to help make it. Michael observed her for a moment, noticing how she seemed different there, more relaxed, wearing jeans and a simple blouse instead of the uniform, her hair loose, framing the face that she usually kept tied in a discreet bun. "You cook well," he commented, tasting a bit of the chocolate frosting she was preparing. "My mother taught me she worked as a cook before the diabetes got worse." "How is she?" "Stable. The doctors say she can go home next week, but she'll need care." Michael hesitated, playing with the empty cup. "You know, I've been thinking. The room where you are is too big for 2 people, and there's that cottage in the back, which we used. As an office, we could adapt it, if your mother wants to join you here." Emily stopped beating the batter, staring at him in surprise. "Are you offering housing for my entire family?" "I'm offering a practical solution," he replied, averting his gaze. "Your mother needs care, your daughter needs a healthy environment, and Tommy, well, he's never been so happy since Lily arrived. I don't know if it would be appropriate, sir." "Appropriate?" Michael laughed, a rare sound that Emily had seldom heard in that house. "Emily, I think we're all ready. Past the point of formality. You took my car without permission, remember?" The comment, instead of embarrassing her, made Emily smile. It was the first time he had mentioned the incident lightly, almost like a private joke between them. "Besides," he continued more seriously, "it would be temporary, until we find a suitable apartment for you, something without mold with good ventilation. I can help with that too." Emily felt her face heat up. "Why are you doing all this for us?" The question hung between them for a few seconds. Michael seemed to be searching for the right words, something unusual for a man usually so articulate. "Because Tommy is smiling again," he finally answered. "Because your daughter deserves a healthy environment. And because—" He hesitated, as if he was about to say something important, but reconsidered. "Because I can help. So why wouldn't I?" Before Emily could respond, the kitchen door opened, and the 2 children came running in with their faces flushed from playing in the garden. "Dad, Him is going to teach me how to ride a bike," announced Tommy, grabbing his father's waist. "She said I'm big enough to take off the training wheels." "Really?" Michael raised an eyebrow at Emily. "I thought that was a father's job." "I'm sorry," she murmured, embarrassed. "He asked and I want it to be Em," interrupted Tommy with the direct honesty of children. "She doesn't yell when I make mistakes." Michael stared at his son, surprised, then turned to Emily. "I yell?" "Sometimes," replied Tommy, shrugging, "when you're stressed about work." The silence that followed was almost palpable. Michael seemed to be processing the information, a revelation about himself coming from the innocent eyes of his son. "All right," he finally said, ruffling the boy's hair, "but I'll watch, and maybe learn some techniques from Emily about how not to yell." That afternoon, as he watched Emily run alongside Tommy's bicycle, firmly holding the seat while instructing the boy with infinite patience, Michael felt something change within him, a new perception that his house, which in the last 5 years had been just a place of passage between professional commitments, was beginning to feel like a home again. When the phone rang later, Michael answered without taking his eyes off. The scene in the garden, where now Lily was also trying to ride the bicycle that was too big for her, supported by her surrogate brother. "Michael, it's me, Victoria." The voice of Dr. Victoria Reed, Tommy's pediatrician and a longtime family friend, brought Michael back to reality. "Victoria, how are you?" he replied, forcing his attention to the call. "I'm well, thank you. I'm calling to confirm dinner. Tomorrow, is it still on?" Michael frowned, confused. "Dinner?" "Yes, we arranged it 2 weeks ago, to discuss the expansion project for the pediatric clinic, remember? You said we could have dinner at my house to talk calmly." Michael vaguely remembered having agreed to the invitation, more out of politeness than real interest. Victoria had been trying to get close to him since the time his wife became ill, always with the excuse of professional concern for Tommy. "Course, the dinner," he replied without enthusiasm. "Actually, Victoria, something unexpected came up. Tommy is learning to ride a bike without training wheels, and I promised we would be practicing all weekend." "Oh." The disappointment in her voice was evident. "Well, we can reschedule, or maybe I could come to your house. It's been a while since I've seen Tommy outside the office." Michael hesitated. There was no rational reason to refuse. Victoria was an excellent doctor, and had always been kind to his son. But something about the way she always tried to create intimate situations bothered him. "Why don't you come for lunch on Sunday?" he suggested, opting for the middle ground. "Tommy will be happy to show you his progress on the bike and we can talk about the project." "Perfect. Should I bring something?" "It's not necessary. We'll be expecting you around noon." When he hung up, he found Emily standing at the living room door, hesitant as if she didn't know whether to interrupt. "I'm sorry, sir. I just wanted to let you know that the cake is ready if you want to try it." Michael nodded, putting the cell phone in his pocket. "Dr. Victoria will come for lunch tomorrow. Can you let Mrs. Betty know to prepare something special?" "Of course." Emily made a motion to leave, but stopped. "Mr. Wilson, about your offer, for my mother to stay here too. I talked to Lily and we accept if it's still on the table. Temporarily, of course." "Great," he replied with a genuine smile. "I'll ask them to prepare the cottage on Monday." On Sunday, Victoria arrived punctually at noon, elegant as always in an emerald green dress that highlighted her light eyes. She brought a gift package for Tommy and a bottle of wine for Michael. "What a pleasant surprise!" she exclaimed upon being received by everyone in the garden, where Tommy was proudly showing off his new skills on the bicycle. Her gaze, however, lingered on Emily and the girl at her side, both dressed in simple Sunday clothes, clearly not work uniforms. "Victoria, this is Emily, who works with us," introduced Michael, noticing the doctor's confused expression. "And this is Lily, her daughter." "Ah, yes, the maid." Victoria smiled politely, extending her hand to Emily. "I didn't know that employees dined with the family on Sundays." "How modern of you, Michael." The condescending tone did not go unnoticed. Michael felt a sudden irritation, but before he could respond, Tommy ran up to them, jumping off the bicycle. "Aunt Victoria." "Look, I'm riding without training wheels. Em taught me." "Em?" Victoria raised an eyebrow, looking from Emily to Michael. "It's what he calls Emily," explained Michael casually. "They're living here temporarily. Lily has respiratory problems, and their apartment doesn't offer adequate conditions." Victoria's expression hardened for an instant before returning to a polite smile. "How generous of you, Michael. Always thinking of others." Lunch proceeded in an atmosphere of polite tension. Victoria alternated between trying to monopolize Michael's attention with discussions about the clinic project and asking seemingly innocent questions to Emily about her life and education. "So you didn't finish high school?" she asked at one point as she savored dessert. "I stopped in my sophomore year when I got pregnant with Lily," replied Emily, maintaining her composure despite the visible discomfort. "What a pity," commented Victoria. "Education is so important, isn't it? Especially to set an example for children." "Emily is completing her GED in the evenings," intervened Michael, surprising everyone at the table, including Emily herself. "And she's an excellent example for Lily and Tommy. She has taught my son more about perseverance in these weeks than many teachers with diplomas on their walls." An awkward silence followed his words. Victoria took a sip of wine, visibly annoyed. Emily looked at Michael with a silent gratitude that he pretended not to notice. "Tommy," called Victoria, changing the subject, "what do you think about coming to the office this week for a routine checkup? It's been a while since we've checked how you're growing." "Do I really have to, Dad?" asked the boy, making a face. "I feel fine." "It's just preventive, dear," insisted Victoria. "We can see if your allergies are under control, especially now that you have contact with new environments." The look she cast at Lily did not go unnoticed by Emily, who instinctively placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Lily doesn't have any contagious disease, Doctor," Emily said calmly. "Her problem is asthma, not something Tommy can catch." Of course, replied Victoria with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But it's never too much to check, is it? By the way, Michael, it would be interesting to do tests on everyone who has close contact with Tommy, as a precaution." Michael observed the interaction with growing discomfort. He had known Victoria for years and had always appreciated her professionalism, but something in her behavior that day deeply bothered him. "We'll schedule Tommy's appointment for next week," he finally conceded. "As for the tests for others, I don't think it's necessary at the moment. When Victoria finally said goodbye late in the afternoon, the tension was almost palpable. Michael accompanied her to the car, aware of Emily's observant gaze from the living room window. "Michael," said Victoria, lowering her voice, "as a friend, I need to say that I'm concerned. You are very close to this employee and her daughter. People might start talking." "People always talk, Victoria," he replied dryly. "I've never cared about that before. It's not just that. You don't know her background, where she comes from, what kind of people she associates with. Tommy is an impressionable child, and Emily is an excellent mother and a dedicated employee," interrupted Michael, his voice firm. "I appreciate your concern, but there's nothing inappropriate happening here." Victoria studied him for a moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I just hope you're not being manipulated by a sad story and a pretty face, Michael. You've always been so rational in business. It would be a shame to see you lose that quality in your personal life." When Victoria's car finally disappeared through the gate, Michael remained standing for a few moments, reflecting on her words. Was it possible that he was actually being irrational? That his solidarity with Emily and Lily was more than simple generosity? He returned to the house thoughtfully, finding Emily tidying up the garden table, now empty except for some cake crumbs and used glasses. "I apologize for Dr. Victoria's behavior," he said, helping her stack the plates. "She's not always like that." "You don't need to apologize, sir. I understand her concern for Tommy, and for what she said about you not finishing your studies. I shouldn't have invented that story about the GED. Emily smiled, a shy smile that lit up her tired face. "Actually, sir, I really did start GED classes 2 weeks ago, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, when I leave early. I just haven't told anyone yet." Michael stared at her, surprised and inexplicably proud. "That's excellent, Emily." "Thank you for defending Lily today," she continued as they collected the last items. "It meant a lot to her, to both of us." Their gazes met for a moment longer than necessary, and Michael felt something inexplicable, as if he were on the verge of an important discovery, but still couldn't name it. "Tommy is very happy with you here," he finally said, averting his gaze to the children playing in the distance in the garden. "And so am I." What Michael didn't say, what perhaps he still couldn't admit even to himself, was that the presence of Emily and Lily had brought back something he thought lost forever, the feeling of family, of home, of belonging. And that, more than anything else, both frightened and fascinated him. In the elegant office of the Westbrook Medical Center, Victoria Reed contemplated the urban landscape of Portland through the panoramic window, her thoughts distant from the medical chart open on her tablet. 2 weeks had passed since lunch at the Wilson mansion, and the scene she had witnessed there still disturbed her, like an out-of-tune song that refuses to leave one's head. Michael, the man she had patiently awaited for 5 years since the death of Clara, his wife, seemed to be falling into the most banal of clichés, getting involved with the domestic employee, and it wasn't just that bothered her. It was the naturalness of the whole scene. Tommy running to Emily as if she were a maternal figure, the frail girl sitting at the main table as if she were part of the family, and Michael, always so reserved and formal, defending that woman, with a passion he had never shown for anyone, not even for her, Victoria, who had been by his side in the most difficult moments. "Doctor?" The secretary's voice through the intercom interrupted her thoughts. "Little Tommy Wilson and his father are here for the appointment." Victoria took a deep breath, composing her best professional smile. "You can send them in, Lucy." The door opened, and Tommy entered first, followed not only by Michael, but also by Emily and her daughter. Victoria's stomach contracted at seeing the quartet that more resembled a family arriving for a consultation. "Michael, what a surprise to see all of you," she commented, maintaining her smile while her eyes registered how Tommy naturally held Lily's hand with childish ease. "I didn't know we would have a collective consultation today." "Lily has an appointment with Dr. Marcus right after," explained Michael casually. "We thought it more practical to all come together." "Dr. Marcus, my colleague in pediatric pulmonology?" Victoria raised her eyebrows. "I didn't know he was treating your employee's daughter." My recommendation, replied Michael, sitting down while Tommy climbed onto the examination table. Since we're all under the same roof, it makes sense for the children to have the same standard of medical care, don't you think? The comment, said so naturally, made Victoria grip the stethoscope more tightly than necessary. Of course, very sensible, she replied, turning to Tommy with forced cheerfulness. So, champion, how are you feeling? The consultation proceeded, within medical normalcy, but with an underlying tension that Victoria struggled to disguise. Michael and Emily conversed in low voices while she examined Tommy, exchanging comments and occasional smiles that seemed too intimate for an employer-employee relationship. Tommy is in excellent shape, she finally concluded, noting the last observations in the chart. But considering the recent changes at home, I think it prudent to do some preventive tests. What kind of tests? Asked Michael, frowning. Just routine, complete blood count, allergy verification, that sort of thing. Victoria briefly looked at Emily and Lily. Actually, it would be ideal if everyone who lives daily with Tommy did similar tests. It's a protocol I suggest to all families when there are new members in the domestic environment. Michael seemed to consider the suggestion for a moment. Seems reasonable. What do you think, Emily? The fact that he consulted the employee's opinion made Victoria feel a wave of irritation that she disguised by adjusting the stethoscope around her neck. If you think it's necessary, it's fine with me, replied Emily. Lily will already be. I'm doing tests with Dr. Marcus today anyway. Excellent, said Victoria, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'll prepare the requisitions for everyone. You can do them right here at the medical center's laboratory. It's more practical. When they finally said goodbye, Victoria remained in her office, watching through the window as the group walked through the parking lot. The image of them together, Michael with his hand occasionally touching Emily's back, the children running ahead, looked like a family photograph that someone had altered, inserting people who shouldn't be there. The next day, the preliminary results of the tests arrived on her desk. As expected, there was nothing abnormal. Tommy enjoyed excellent health, as did Michael. The tests for Emily and Lily, forwarded by Dr. Marcus as a professional courtesy, also showed nothing beyond the girls' already known respiratory problem. Victoria stared at the reports for long minutes, an idea slowly forming in her mind. It was unethical, it was despicable, it was risky, but it was also her only chance to interrupt what she saw as a monumental mistake by Michael before it was too late. With slightly trembling fingers, she opened the digital file of Emily's report and began to make subtle alterations to the values of some blood markers. Nothing too drastic, just enough to suggest a potentially concerning infectious condition. She added technical notes about the need for preventive isolation and, with a last moment of hesitation, saved the altered document. Michael needs to see the mistake he's making, she murmured to herself, as justification. It's for his and Tommy's own good. A week later, sitting in her office with Michael in front of her, Victoria observed his expression change from curiosity to concern, then to shock, as she explained the findings in Emily's tests. It's not something definitive, she said, with false compassion in her voice, but the markers suggest an infectious condition that may represent a risk for those who have prolonged contact, especially children. But she seems perfectly healthy, argued Michael, studying the report with disbelief. And Lily also showed nothing in her tests. Lily probably has already developed immunity living with her mother, improvised Victoria. But Tommy hasn't. And with the history of respiratory sensitivity he had in childhood, she left the sentence hanging in the air, allowing Michael's imagination to complete the somber picture she was painting. She could see the conflict in his eyes, paternal concern fighting against the affection he had developed for Emily and her daughter. "What do you suggest?" he finally asked, his voice tense. "As a doctor, I have to recommend immediate separation," replied Victoria, feigning reluctance. "I know it's difficult, that you've created a bond with them, but Tommy's health must come first, don't you agree?" Michael nodded slowly, his expression becoming distant, as if he were already planning the next steps. "It doesn't have to be forever," added Victoria, feeling she needed to offer some comfort to seal the deal. With appropriate treatment, perhaps, in a few months the situation will normalize. 3 days later, Victoria received a message from Michael informing her that Emily had been removed. He didn't go into details, and she knew it would be improper to ask for more. She felt a contradictory mixture of triumph and guilt, but quickly pushed away the second feeling. She had done what was necessary to protect everyone's interests, especially her own. What Victoria didn't foresee was Tommy's reaction. In the follow-up consultation, 2 weeks after Emily's departure, the boy was unrecognizable, quiet, downcast, refusing to answer questions that would normally excite him. "He's been like this since Emily left," explained Michael. "The deep, circles under his eyes revealing sleepless nights. He doesn't eat properly, he started wetting the bed again, he has nightmares. The school psychologist suggested it might be a case of childhood anxiety." "Children are resilient," replied Victoria, trying to sound reassuring. "It's just a phase of adaptation. He'll get over it soon." But Tommy didn't get over it. In the following weeks, his emotional state only worsened. His school performance dropped, he refused to participate in activities he used to love, and he began to exhibit regressive behaviors, such as thumb-sucking and talking like a much younger child. "I want M," was what he said repeatedly when Michael tried to cheer him up with new toys or outings. In her office, Victoria received increasingly concerning updates about the boy's condition. The guilt, which before was just an uncomfortable sensation easily ignored, began to grow like a silent infection. In her most honest moments, she admitted that she had never expected such a severe reaction from the child. "Maybe we should reconsider Emily's diagnosis," suggested Michael one afternoon, after another examination in which Tommy had refused to cooperate. "Do new tests, seek a second opinion." Panic rose up Victoria's throat like bile. "Why? The results were quite clear." "Tommy is suffering, Victoria. I've never seen him like this, not even after Clara." Michael paused, unable to complete the sentence about his deceased wife. "Maybe the risk isn't as great as we thought." "Michael, as a doctor, I can't recommend that you expose your son to a known risk just because he is emotionally attached to someone," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "It would be irresponsible of me." Michael sighed heavily, running his hands over his tired face. "You're right, of course you are. It's just that I never imagined it would be so difficult." The height of the crisis came 6 weeks after Emily's departure. Tommy fainted during recess at school, apparently without immediate physical cause. He was taken to the emergency room at St. Mary's Hospital, where Michael found him being attended to by an on-duty pediatrician. "He's physically fine," explained Dr. Henry Lewis, a middle-aged man with a kind expression. "All vital signs normal, no sign of infection or neurological problem, but the emotional picture is concerning." "What do you mean?" "Your son presents all the classic symptoms of a severe case of emotional stress," explained the doctor. "When I asked what was making him sad, he repeatedly mentioned someone called M and a girl named Lily. He said he misses them and wants them to come back home." Michael nodded, his heart tight. "They're people who lived with us until recently. There was a health problem, we had to remove them." Dr. Lewis studied Michael for a moment. "Mr. Wilson, I don't know the details of the situation, but from a medical point of view, what I'm seeing is a classic case of childhood grief. For a child, the sudden loss of an emotionally important figure can be as traumatic as loss through death." The words hit Michael like a punch. Grief. The same pain he had seen Tommy face 5 years earlier, when Clara died after a long illness. The same pain that he himself still carried, although he had learned to live with it. "What can I do?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Reconciliation, if possible," replied the doctor. "If there's some safe way to re-establish contact, even if gradual or limited, that would be ideal. Children need closure, proper goodbyes or reunions when possible. The abrupt cut is what hurts the most." While keeping watch over Tommy's restless sleep in the hospital room, Michael was surprised by a familiar voice. "Mr. Wilson? Michael?" He turned to find Mark, a middle-aged nurse who had cared for Clara in her last months. The man approached, with a smile of recognition. It's been a while. I hope the little one is all right. Just emotional exhaustion, replied Michael, shaking the nurse's hand. And you, how are you? Well, thank you. I've been covering extra shifts. I actually attended to an acquaintance of yours a while ago, Emily Martinez. She came to do some follow-up tests for her daughter. Michael felt his heart race. Emily was here today. Yes, a few hours ago. Her daughter Lily is in treatment for asthma with Dr. Andrew. They requested a complete battery of tests for both of them, and I collected the samples. By the way, Emily's preliminary results just came, and everything absolutely normal to her relief. Michael froze, the nurse's words echoing in his mind. Normal, are you sure? Absolutely. I made a point of checking twice because she seemed very anxious. Apparently there was some problem with previous tests, something about an infectious condition that left her quite concerned. A buzzing began in Michael's ears as pieces of a dark puzzle began to fit together in his mind. Mark, he said slowly, could you show me these results? And the previous ones too, if they're in the system. The nurse hesitated. Well, it's not exactly protocol, but considering that you paid for the tests and that there's an authorization from her in the system to share results with you, I think I can do that. Half an hour later, sitting in the small doctor's room, with two reports side by side on the computer screen, Michael felt a toxic mixture of anger and guilt growing in his chest. Emily's tests at St. Mary's showed completely normal results. The reports presented by Victoria, with altered values and technical notes about isolation, now seemed obvious in their falsification. How did I not notice? He murmured to himself, Victoria's image reformulating in his mind. No longer the reliable friend and dedicated doctor, but a woman capable of destroying lives for... what? Jealousy? Possessiveness? Or something even more disturbing? That same night, with Tommy finally sleeping at home, under the effect of mild sedation recommended by the doctor, Michael drove to Victoria's office. He knew she usually worked late, updating charts and studying cases. He found her exactly as he imagined, sitting at her elegant desk, reading glasses perched on the tip of her nose as she typed on the computer. She smiled when she saw him, a smile that now seemed predatory, calculated. Michael, what a surprise! How is Tommy? You lied to me, he said simply, placing the two printed reports on the desk, the real one and the falsified one. Victoria's smile froze, her eyes quickly passing from the papers to Michael's hard face. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. You altered Emily's tests. You invented a condition that doesn't exist. Why, Victoria? Why would you do something like this? For a moment she seemed to consider denying it, but the evidence was too clear, Michael's expression too determined. Her shoulders dropped slightly, the only visible sign of surrender. I did what I thought necessary, she finally replied, her voice low but firm. You were getting involved with a maid, Michael. A woman without education, without refinement, without anything to offer besides. A sad story and a sick daughter. You deserve better. Tommy deserves better. Who are you to decide what we deserve? Michael's voice was controlled, but vibrated with contained anger. You played with my son's health. Tommy is suffering, having nightmares, regressing emotionally. All because you couldn't stand to see another woman in my house? I was protecting you, exclaimed Victoria, standing up. That woman was manipulating you, using her daughter's illness to get advantages. Didn't you notice how obvious it was? The borrowed car, the sudden housing, the access to your son. She was building a trap around you, and you were falling for it like a naive teenager. Michael stared at her, seeing for the first time the obsession in her eyes, the distorted conviction that she was right. Emily never asked for anything, he replied calmly. It was I who offered help. Housing, school for her daughter, everything was my initiative. Because she's smart, insisted Victoria. The best manipulators make you think everything was your idea. Michael shook his head, a deep sadness replacing the initial anger. I'm going to request the transfer of Tommy's file to another pediatrician, and I hope for the sake of your career that no one else discovers what you did. Michael, wait, she called when he turned to leave. I did it out of love for you and for Tommy. He stopped at the door without turning around. That wasn't love, Victoria. It was obsession, and it cost much more than you imagine. As he drove back home, Michael felt an enormous weight on his shoulders. He had made a terrible mistake, trusting Victoria's words without questioning, without seeking a second opinion. And Emily, who had always been loyal, dedicated, loving to his son, had paid the highest price. Fired without explanation, removed from an environment that had become her home too, treated as disposable after everything she had done for them. The question now was it too late to fix the mistake? Would Emily forgive him? And more importantly, had this painful experience destroyed forever the fragile family they were beginning to build? If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. Horizon. Cleaning services occupied 2 floors of a worn commercial building in downtown Portland. At 7 in the morning, the movement was already intense in the women's locker room, where employees put on light blue uniforms before departing for their workstations in offices and establishments throughout the city. Emily Martinez was adjusting the badge on the pocket of her uniform when Jessica, an older colleague, approached with a concerned expression. "Are you all right, girl? You look paler than usual." "Just tired," replied Emily with a weak smile. "Lily had a mild attack last night. We were up late." The truth, which she didn't share with anyone, was that she hadn't been sleeping properly for weeks. Since she had been fired from the Wilson mansion without clear explanation, her life had collapsed like a house of cards. The small, damp apartment, which had seemed temporarily abandoned during their stay at the mansion, now seemed even more suffocating. Lily's attacks had returned with full force in the unhealthy environment. Mrs. Rose, her mother, needed constant care that Emily could barely provide, divided between 2 jobs and caring for her daughter. But the worst was the emotional pain. The way Michael had dismissed her, cold, distant, almost clinical in his decision, after months of getting closer and what she had naively interpreted as the beginning of a true friendship. And Tommy, thinking about the boy hurt like an open wound. She had promised to teach him to ride a bike on the hills of the park, to make a kite to fly on windy Sundays, to prepare the chocolate cake he so adored. Broken promises that she knew the little one wouldn't understand. "Your sector today is the 18th floor of Sovereign Business Tower," informed the supervisor, handing her the clipboard with instructions. "Administrative offices and 3 bathrooms. Alone today, Sandra requested medical leave." Emily nodded, storing the simple lunchbox in her bag. Another day of scrubbing floors, cleaning toilets, and emptying trash cans, for a salary that barely covered the family's basic needs. But there was no room for self-pity. There never had been. At Sovereign Business Tower, the day proceeded like any other. Emily cleaned methodically, concentrating on physical tasks to prevent her mind from wandering to painful memories. It was in the women's bathroom on the floor, kneeling to scrub the base of a toilet, that she heard the door open and a familiar voice call her name. "Emily!" She raised her eyes, incredulous. Michael Wilson was standing at the entrance to the women's bathroom, looking completely out of place in his impeccable suit, his expression a mixture of determination and embarrassment. "Mr. Wilson?" Emily quickly stood up, conscious of the uniform stained with cleaning products, the yellow rubber gloves, the hair tied up carelessly. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for you," he replied simply, taking a hesitant step in her direction. "I went to the cleaning company. They said you were here today." Emily slowly removed the gloves, trying to process the situation. The man who had dismissed her without explanations was now in a women's bathroom of a commercial office, looking for her. Nothing made sense. "We need to talk," continued Michael, suddenly seeming insecure, very different from the confident businessman she knew. It's about everything, about why you left, about Tommy." "I didn't leave," corrected Emily, a slight tremor in her voice betraying her contained emotion. "I was sent away by you." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, as if the words had physically hit him. When he reopened them, Emily saw something she never imagined she would see in that always controlled man: vulnerability. "I made a terrible mistake," he admitted, his voice low. "I was deceived, manipulated, and you paid the price. I'm here to try to fix that if it's still possible." Before Emily could respond, the bathroom door opened again, and a middle-aged executive entered, stopping abruptly at seeing a man in the women's environment. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking from Michael to Emily with suspicion. "I'm sorry, ma'am," replied Emily quickly. He's my former boss. He came to deal with pending documents from my dismissal." The woman still seemed suspicious, but nodded briefly. "Do this somewhere else, please. This is a women's bathroom." When the executive entered one of the stalls, Michael made a gesture toward the door. "So can we talk somewhere else? My car is downstairs. Or we can go to a coffee shop if you prefer." Emily hesitated. A part of her wanted to refuse, to protect herself from more disappointments. But another part, perhaps the same that had made her take the keys to the SUV on that fateful day, needed to understand what had happened. "I have a lunch break in half an hour," she finally replied. "There's a food court on the ground floor." At the simple table in the food court, with an untouched coffee in front of her, Emily listened in silence as Michael explained everything. The tests altered by Victoria, the discovery of the fraud, Tommy's emotional state after the separation. "He asks about you every day," concluded Michael, his voice choked. "He draws you and Lily in school activities. He saves toys that he thinks Lily would like. It's as if—" He hesitated, searching for words. "It's as if he refuses to accept that you won't come back." Emily stared at the cold coffee, emotions in turmoil. Anger, hurt, confusion, and a longing that hurt physically when she thought of Tommy. "Why did you believe her?" she finally asked, raising her eyes to Michael. "Why didn't you talk to me? Didn't ask for a second opinion? Didn't question anything?" "Because I was a fool," he replied without hesitation. "Because Victoria was a friend of years, a respected professional, someone I blindly trusted. And because—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with the next admission. "Because maybe, unconsciously, I was scared of what was happening between us." And what was happening between us? The question came out almost as a whisper. Michael stared at her, his eyes revealing a disarming sincerity. "We were becoming a family, Emily. You, me, Tommy, Lily, and that terrified me, not because of you, but because of me. Because of the responsibility, the fear of opening my heart again and losing everything once more." Emily felt the tears she had been holding back for weeks finally overflow. She quickly wiped them with the sleeve of her uniform, embarrassed, to show fragility. "Don't cry, please," asked Michael, extending his hand across the table but stopping before touching hers. "I know what I did is unforgivable, but Tommy needs you, and I—" He hesitated again. "I miss you too. More than I thought possible." "What exactly are you asking, Michael?" asked Emily, noticing that for the first time she had used his name, without the formal Mr. before it. "I'm asking you to come back, not as an employee, but as—" He seemed to search for the appropriate word. "As part of our family, you and Lily." Emily shook her head, incredulous. "Things aren't that simple. You fired me without explanation, treated me as disposable after everything we built. How can I trust that you won't do the same the next time a problem arises?" "I can't promise I'll never make mistakes again," replied Michael after a moment of reflection. "But I can promise that I'll never again make decisions that affect your life without consulting you, without being transparent. I can promise that I'll fight every day to earn your trust again." The silence that followed was interrupted by the alarm on Emily's cell phone indicating the end of her break. "I need to get back to work," she said, standing up. "I can't just abandon my post." "I understand," replied Michael, also standing. "But please promise you'll think about it. If not for me, for Tommy. And—" He hesitated. "And for Lily, too. I know the conditions where you're living aren't ideal for her health." The mention of her daughter hit Emily at her most vulnerable point. It was true. Lily had had more attacks in the last weeks than in the months they lived at the mansion. The damp apartment, the cold nights, the lack of resources for adequate treatment. "I'll think about it," she finally conceded, "but I don't promise anything. That's all I ask." At the exit of the food court, Michael surprised her with a question. "Can I see Lily? It doesn't have to be today or tomorrow, whenever you feel comfortable." Emily nodded slowly. "She asks about Tommy too. Maybe on Sunday. We'll be at Riverside Park in the morning if it doesn't rain." The smile that lit up Michael's face was genuine, almost buoyant. "We'll be there." That night in her small apartment, Emily watched Lily sleeping restlessly, the characteristic wheeze of asthma audible even in sleep breathing. Mrs. Rose knitted silently in her worn armchair, her eyes occasionally rising to study her daughter. "So, he came after you then," commented the elderly woman, surprising Emily. "How do you know that?" "It's written on your face, daughter. I've known that look since you were a little girl. It's the look of someone who is divided between pride and heart." Emily sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed where her daughter slept. "I don't know what to do, Mum. He hurt us deeply." "The question isn't whether he made a mistake," replied Mrs. Rose, the knitting needles clicking softly in her wrinkled hands. "Everyone makes mistakes. The question is whether he recognized the mistake and is willing to fix it. And if it happens again? If he hurts us again? Then you get up, dust yourself off, and move on, as you've always done." The elderly woman smiled gently. "But Emily, think carefully. It's not just about you and Michael. It's about Lily and that boy Tommy, about the good they did for each other." Emily caressed her daughter's hair damp with sweat, remembering how she flourished at the mansion, healthier, happier, more secure. "I'm afraid, Mom," she admitted in a low voice. "Fear only protects us up to a certain point, daughter. After that, it just prevents us from living." On Sunday, Riverside Park was relatively empty due to the fine drizzle that had been falling since dawn. Emily and Lily walked slowly along the path that surrounded the lake, protected by a shared umbrella. The girl occasionally skipped, pointing to the ducks that navigated imperturbably through the water. "Mom, look, it's Tommy and Uncle Michael." Emily followed her daughter's gaze and saw them approaching from the opposite path. Michael holding a large umbrella, Tommy running ahead of him, carrying something in his hands. Her heart involuntarily accelerated. "Em!" Tommy's shout echoed through the park as he ran in her direction, ignoring the rain, arms extended as if he couldn't wait another second to reach her. Emily barely had time to pass the umbrella to Lily before the boy threw himself into her arms, hugging her with surprising strength for such a small child. You came back," he repeated, his face buried in her coat. "I knew you would come back." "Tommy, Emily couldn't complete the sentence, emotion closing her throat as she hugged the boy back, feeling his body tremble slightly. From cold or emotion, she wouldn't know. Michael approached more slowly, extending the umbrella to protect the three of them while Lily ran to hug him around the legs. "Uncle Michael, I missed you." "Me too, little one," he replied, crouching down to hug her properly. "We brought something for you." Tommy finally let go of Emily and extended what he was carrying, a package wrapped in colorful paper, now a bit damp from the rain. "It's a present," he explained, his eyes shining with expectation. "Open it." With hesitant hands, Lily unwrapped the package, revealing a toy stethoscope and a small white lab coat with her name embroidered on it. "It's for you to play doctor," explained Tommy proudly, "because you're going to be a doctor when you grow up, aren't you? You said you wanted to take care of children with asthma." "Thank you," whispered Lily, admiring the gift with wonder in her eyes. "Can I try it on you?" While the children moved a few steps away to play, protected by the cover of a nearby tree, Michael and Emily remained side by side, sharing the umbrella in silence. "He didn't sleep all night," commented Michael finally. "He was afraid you wouldn't come because of the rain." "I thought about cancelling," admitted Emily, but Lily was equally anxious. They observed the children for a few more moments, Tommy lying on the wet grass, allowing Lily to listen to his heart with the toy, both laughing as if the last months of separation had never existed. "I've been thinking a lot," said Emily finally, about your proposal." Michael turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral, as if he feared showing both hope and disappointment. "And?" "I can't just come back as if nothing happened," she replied, looking at him directly. "Trust was broken, Michael. It will take time to rebuild." He nodded, the disappointment visible despite his efforts to hide it. "I understand. But," continued Emily, "maybe we can start slowly. Supervised visits, so the children can see each other. Maybe some weekends at the mansion if you're really willing." Michael's face gradually lit up as she spoke. "I'm willing to do anything, Emily. Absolutely anything. And we need to establish clear boundaries about my role there, about expectations, about communication. Of course, we can put everything in writing if you prefer." Emily smiled slightly, shaking her head. "That won't be necessary, just honest conversations." She looked again at the children, who had now included some curious ducks in their doctor game. It seemed so natural, so right to see them together again. "One last thing," she added, turning to Michael. "I don't want to be seen as someone in need of charity. If we come back, it will be as equals, not as employer and employee, nor as benefactor and beneficiary." Michael studied her for a long moment, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. "As family, then," he finally said. "That's what we are, isn't it? A strange, improvised family still learning to know each other. But a family, anyway." The word hung between them, loaded with meanings and possibilities. Emily felt a knot in her throat, fighting between fear and hope. "A family," she finally repeated, as if testing how the words sounded on her lips. "Maybe. With time." Michael's smile was contained, but his eyes revealed a joy she had never seen in him before. Not the controlled businessman, not the concerned father, but simply a man glimpsing the possibility of happiness before him. "Time is all I ask," he replied, hesitantly extending his hand to her. After a moment of hesitation, Emily accepted it, feeling the warmth of his fingers intertwined with hers as they watched the children playing in the fine rain. The future uncertain, but suddenly full of possibilities. Neither of them noticed in the distance the solitary figure of Victoria Reed observing the scene from inside her parked car, her knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel so tightly, her eyes fixed on the couple sharing an umbrella, and apparently much more than that. The doctor started the engine and quickly departed, her thoughts a dark whirlwind of anger and resentment. This wasn't over, not for her. The months that followed brought a gradual transformation for all involved. Emily initially accepted only that Lily would spend the weekends at the Wilson mansion, allowing her daughter to enjoy Tommy's company and a healthier environment for her sensitive lungs. She herself returned to the small apartment, using the time to reflect and process everything that had happened. Michael respected her space, never pressing for more than she was willing to offer, but always making it clear, through small gestures, that the door remained open. An invitation to dinner here, a message asking about Lily's day there, an offer to pick up Mrs. Rose for her medical appointments. It was during one of these weekends, 3 months after the reunion in the park, that the real turning point began. Emily had agreed to stay at the mansion with Lily due to a severe storm forecast for Portland. The children were playing in the game room while she helped Mrs. Betty with dinner, not as an employee, but as a friend, remembering recipes her mother had taught her. "You make a good team," commented the elderly cook, observing how Michael and Emily moved in sync through the kitchen, him reaching utensils from the high shelves for her, Emily intuiting exactly when he needed more space. "It's just a matter of practice," replied Emily, feeling her face heat up slightly. "I know how to recognize something more than practice when I see it," murmured Mrs. Betty with a discreet smile. "I've been working here since before Tommy was born. I've never seen the boss so light." Later, when the children were already asleep and Mrs. Betty had retired to her quarters, Michael found Emily on the covered porch, watching the heavy rain falling on the garden. "Coffee," he offered, extending a steaming cup. "Thank you," she replied, accepting the hot drink. "It's a beautiful night despite the storm." "I agree," said Michael, sitting in the chair beside her. "I like storms. They clean the air, restart everything. Emily smiled at the not-so-subtle metaphor. Speaking of restarts, I received an interesting call today. From whom? From the principal of the school where Lily studies. Apparently, someone paid all the late tuition and advanced the entire year, including school supplies and a new uniform. Michael took a sip of coffee, avoiding her gaze. How generous of this person. Michael, Emily turned to face him directly. I said, I didn't want charity. It's not charity, he replied, finally meeting her eyes. It's an investment in the future of a brilliant child who by chance means a lot to me and to my son. Emily shook her head, but there was no real disapproval in her gesture. You're impossible. Just determined, he corrected with a slight smile. Besides, it wasn't the only interesting call of the day. What do you mean? I received a visit from the Regional Medical Council. Apparently, an anonymous complaint led to the discovery of irregularities in the medical reports issued by a certain pediatrician. Emily widened her eyes. Victoria? Michael nodded. The investigation is ongoing, but she has already been temporarily removed. It seems that our case wasn't the only one in which she manipulated results for her own benefit. Did you make the complaint? No, he replied honestly. I believe it was one of her medical colleagues, perhaps that nurse, Mark, who noticed the discrepancies in the tests. Anyway, she won't be able to harm anyone else. A comfortable silence established itself between them as they watched the rain, each lost in their own thoughts. I finished my GED, commented Emily suddenly. I received the certificate last week. Michael turned to her, genuinely surprised and happy. Emily, that's wonderful. Why didn't you say before? She shrugged, a shy smile on her lips. I wanted to be sure I would succeed before telling anyone. And now, what are your plans? I enrolled in a nursing technical course, she replied, a new confidence in her voice. I've always wanted to work in healthcare, especially after all of Lily's hospitalizations. I thought I could help other mothers who go through the same thing. Michael studied her with admiration. You're amazing, you know that. After everything you've been through, you still think about how to help others. Emily blushed at the sincere compliment. It's just what seems right to do. Is the course full-time? No, just evenings. I'll continue working during the day, at least for now. Michael hesitated as if carefully choosing his next words. I have a proposal for you, Emily. Not as charity, but as a legitimate professional opportunity. She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. I'm listening. My dental clinics are expanding to a new concept of integrated family health. We're hiring administrative assistants for the pediatric patient reception sector, someone who understands the needs of families, who knows how to calm anxious children, who has practical experience with emergency situations. And you think I fit that profile? Perfectly, he replied. The schedule would be compatible with your studies, the salary significantly better than your current one, and you would have access to opportunities for professional growth in the future. Emily studied him, looking for any sign that this was just another disguised gesture of charity. She found only sincerity in his gaze. I'll think about it, she finally promised, but I don't want people to think I got the job for other reasons. What other reasons? Teased Michael, a playful gleam in his eyes. You know, because of our friendship. Friendship, he repeated, savoring the word. Is that what we have? The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken possibilities. Emily felt her heart race, aware that they were on the verge of something new and frightening. I don't know exactly how to define what we have, she finally admitted. I just know it's important to me. To both of us. To all four of us, corrected Michael softly. Tommy asked last night when you would come to live here permanently. He said he's tired of having his family divided. He said that? Family? Michael nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. Children have a simple way of seeing things, don't they? For him, it's obvious that we are a family. Perhaps we should learn from that clarity. Michael. Emily hesitated, the cup trembling slightly in her hands. We have very different histories, different worlds. It's not as simple as Tommy thinks. Maybe it is exactly that simple, he replied, gently taking the cup from her hands and placing it on the side table. Maybe it's us, adults, who complicate everything with fears and insecurities. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Michael extended his hand to touch Emily's face, a touch as light as the breeze that occasionally burst onto the porch. "I'm in love with you, Emily," he said simply. "I think I already was when you took my car without permission to save your daughter. I certainly was when I accepted that you left without fighting. And I'm absolutely certain now, seeing the incredible woman you are, the dedicated mother, the person who never gives up, no matter how many obstacles appear in the way." Emily felt tears forming, but this time she didn't wipe them away, allowing them to fall freely. "I'm so afraid," she confessed in a whisper, "afraid of trusting and getting hurt again, afraid of not being enough for you, for this world. You are more than enough," he replied, drying a tear with his thumb. "You're exactly what has always been missing here, what Tommy and I needed without knowing." At that moment, as if to confirm destiny, the storm that had been lashing Portland began to diminish, giving way to a soft and constant rain. Fresh air invaded the porch, bringing the aroma of wet earth and new possibilities. "I'm in love with you too," Emily finally admitted, the words coming out like a liberation. "Even when I should have hated you, even when I tried to forget, even when everything seemed impossible." The kiss that followed was gentle, a silent promise, a new beginning amid the rain that washed everything around. 6 months later, on a sunny spring afternoon, the Wilson mansion was in a flurry. Staff came and went, carrying furniture and boxes from the old cottage to the interior of the main house. In the garden, Tommy and Lily supervised the installation of a double swing, seriously opining on the ideal height for children of their ages. "Are you sure you want to do this?" asked Mrs. Rose to Emily as they watched the movement through the kitchen window. "It's not too late to change your mind." "I've never been so sure of anything in my life, Mom," replied Emily, affectionately squeezing the elderly woman's hand. "We're a family now. It's time we lived as one." The previous day had been Emily's last in the nursing technical course, which she had completed with distinction. Next week, she would officially start as a reception coordinator in the new pediatric wing of Wilson Clinics, a position she had earned on her own merit after impressing the board with her innovative ideas to improve the family experience. "It still feels like a dream," she commented, adjusting the small engagement ring that Michael had given her the previous month. Not an ostentatious jewel, but a delicate piece that she could wear comfortably during work. "As if at any moment I would wake up back at that bus stop at 5 in the morning." "It's not a dream, daughter," replied Mrs. Rose with a wise smile. "It's life rewarding those who don't give up." At the kitchen door, Michael appeared with an amused expression. "The children are demanding the presence of both of you for an urgent family meeting in the garden. Something about the color we should paint the treehouse." "Treehouse?" asked Emily, raising an eyebrow. "This is the first time I'm hearing about this." "Well, apparently our children have already decided they need one," he replied, extending his hand to her. "And apparently we need to vote democratically. On the color. Our children." The words still caused a wave of emotion in Emily every time she heard them. It wasn't just Tommy and Lily now. They were their children, theirs. A family built not by blood but by love and the conscious choice to be together. In the garden, under the oldest oak on the property, the children had improvised a conference table with moving boxes and garden chairs. Tommy, with the seriousness of a miniature executive, presented a colorful drawing of what he imagined to be the perfect treehouse. "We need to decide on the color now," he insisted, while Lily solemnly nodded at his side. "Uncle Nathan said he'll start building next week." "And what are the options?" asked Michael, sitting in one of the improvised chairs and pulling Emily to sit beside him. "Green, blue, or yellow," replied Lily, showing the 3 corresponding. "Colored pencils. And why do we need Grandma Rose to decide this?" asked Emily, helping her mother to sit comfortably. "Because it's a family decision," explained Tommy, as if it were obvious. "And families decide important things together." Michael and Emily exchanged an emotional look, recognizing the depth of those simple words. In the children, they saw the reflection of the home they had created together, a place where everyone had a voice, where decisions were shared, where respect and love were the foundations. "Well, in that case," said Michael, pretending to seriously consider the question, "what color do you think best matches our family?" Tommy and Lily looked at each other as if they had already discussed the question at length. "All of them," Lily finally replied. "We can make each wall a different color. That way everyone is happy." "A diplomatic solution," approved Mrs. Rose with a smile. "This girl will go far." As the children ran to show Nathan their colorful decision, Michael pulled Emily closer, embracing her by the waist as they observed the scene. "Happy?" he asked softly. "More than I thought possible," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you?" "Complete," he said simply, as if I had finally found all the pieces of the puzzle. That late afternoon, as the sun set over Portland, the Wilson mansion, now simply the home of the Wilson-Martinez family, shone with a golden light that seemed to reflect the happiness of its residents. In the garden, 2 children and a newly adopted dog ran freely. On the porch, a couple and an elderly lady observed with tranquil smiles, and in the air hung the certainty that some paths, however unlikely they may seem, are exactly those we should follow. Emily and Michael's journey proved that true love often appears in the most unexpected places, that families can